So even we've spent many, many hours on this project. I was asked to speak. Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. So we're going to try to quickly cover these 5 topics today. We have about 30 minutes, about a 30-minute presentation. We could talk about all of these for hours, and we have talked about them for hours, but we're just going to kind of give you a little introduction of things that we touched upon. As we go through, let's say if you have questions, if I lapse into some jargon or some term that you don't understand, just ask, because Dollars to Donuts, there'll be other people who will be grateful that you asked the question. If you have a question, like a more deeper technical question that requires discussion, like why did you use the state sea level rise projections, we'll hold that to the end, okay? And then working with Daniel, Andrea, and Barbara, they had a lot of things that they wanted me to be sure not to forget. If I forget, just yell it out, okay? All right, so good. And so that will hopefully keep us on track to wrap up and share this with you. So we're gonna start with a little overview of the water supply, Suffolk County's water supply, Orient's water supply, what we did to answer the question whether Orient as a community has enough fresh water, we call it potable water, but a safe freshwater supply to sustain all the needs of the residents and the farmers. We're going to talk about how we considered groundwater quality, what we did to look at that, introduce some climate change considerations, and then we'll have a little time for wrap up, okay? So here we go. This is a cross-section. So where do we get our water supply from? It's from groundwater, right? Beneath us, the ground we stand on, there's layers of sand, gravel, silt, clays, going down to, in the western part of the county, over 1,000 feet, right? So all the different pores, all the little pore spaces of those sands and gravels are what supplies the groundwater that we drink. I live in Brookhaven. My wells screen down a few hundred feet in the Magothy Aquifer. If you lived on Long Beach in Nassau County, you'd be pulling your water from the Lloyd Aquifer, over 1,000 feet deep, probably could be over 1,000 years old. I mean, it's hundreds of years old. You guys in Orient are limited just to this upper glacial aquifer. It's much smaller, it's much more fragile, it's much more limited. It's something that you have to just be aware of and take care of. Beneath the upper glacial aquifer, you have salt water. So you're kind of surrounded, you know, the sound, the bay, and beneath you.
So we don't have the Magothy or the...
Oh, they're there. Those units are there, but they're not a fresh aquifer there. They're salty. They're full of salt water. Yeah. So this is just a cross section, right along Main Road from west to east. It's some vertical exaggeration here, about 10 to 1, because if I made it a 1 to 1, we tried that because the team wanted to see it. It comes out as a line, you can't see anything. So west here, where we are, is about 80, 85 feet thick of water, not 1,000 feet, you know, like the western part of the county has. And then east of Narrow River, it's about 50, 55 feet of water. So it's not a lot that you're working with right here. So we have a little visualization. Let's see if this works, hopefully. If not, I have a plan B, so don't worry. All right, I guess we're going to plan B, because it doesn't seem to be kicking in. I had all this loaded on my machine, but I thought it would be more efficient to do it this way, so bear with me 1 minute. Get it up. Okay, good.
I couldn't see.
You're not seeing what I'm seeing once again.
I
So
think go out of slide mode now. Presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
There you go.
All right, we're still not seeing it.
Oh, there you go.
Is it coming?
Yes,
Oh,
but
it's behind there.
It's behind the slide.
Just minimize that.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, so now we have a 10 to 1 vertical exaggeration, and you can see, hold on one second, I'm gonna just stop it. So you can see kind of the bluffs along the north, right? We're looking from south to north. I'll start it again. And this purple is your groundwater. So you can see there's a lot of unsaturated zone. Beneath you is the saltwater interface. I want you to just look at this. Let me stop it for 1 second. See, this is the narrow river. See how thin the aquifer is right as you cross there? So that'll be important later on when we're looking at sea level rise considerations. Your water table, we'll look at that later, but your water elevation is maybe 3 to 5 feet above sea level there. So we're gonna spin.
And this is exaggerated height-wise?
This is exaggerated 10 to 1, Chris.
Okay.
Yep, 10 to 1, thank you. So we're just spinning it around again looking from south to north, and then hopefully we don't get anybody too dizzy as we're spinning around. But the engineer who did this for me kind of flipped it over, so just so you can see from underneath, stop for a second, what it looks like. This is the fresh water extending down into the salt water. So here again is Narrow River. Here's where it's the thickest. Here's where it's maybe like 50 feet thick. And we'll come back above ground in a second. Yeah, there we are. Okay. So that's just kind of like a quick overview of what it looks like. And now let's go back. Great. Okay, good. It actually worked that time. So let's pick up from here. Okay. So just so you can see that a little bit more clearly, now we have a 50 to 1 vertical exaggeration. So you can actually read these numbers on the scale. Remember the first cross section we showed went down to like 1,000 feet? You're about 85 feet here to the west, 55 feet here to the east. So it's not a lot that you're working with. You've got a shallow aquifer, limited capacity, so we just have to be careful. Now we have a few little cartoons just to explain a little bit more. This is again that typical cross section through north-south, a little bit further west on the island. All of the groundwater beneath us, all of your fresh water supply comes from recharging precipitation, right? Rain that falls down on the ground surface recharges down. I want to say long-term annual average, it varies from year to year, right? But it's about 47, 48 inches of rain per year. You get a lot of recharge during the winter months. During the growing season, a lot is lost to evapotranspiration, pumping gets higher, so there's a lot less recharge during the summer months, during the growing season. All of that recharging precipitation travels down through the aquifer, and it's discharged, it's removed either at a shallow well, and that's what we have here, right, shallow wells. Up island we have the deep wells, or it's discharged to the surrounding saltwater or streams. They're all groundwater fed, and that keeps the system in balance. It keeps the saltwater from moving in, that you constantly have that outflow. Everything that we do on top of the ground surface, everything we do has the potential to introduce substances, some contaminants from the ground surface, travels down with the recharge and out either into a well or out to the surface waters. So again, we just have to be cognizant of that. So we have agriculture is one consideration. One of the largest sources of contamination out here is septic systems. Anything that you flush down the toilet, wash down the drain, in your washing machine, in the dishwasher, all goes down into the ground surface. Any fertilizer or pesticides that might be applied in parks or golf courses has the potential to travel down through the aquifer system. Any commercial facilities, if there's chemicals stored there that are spilled on the ground surface, have the potential. And so again, it's just a matter of being aware of that and being careful in the choices that you make. So that's our quick background. Now to the question that was initially posed to us, does Orient have enough water? I want to show these figures. These are model simulations of the water table or the, the aquifer thickness in Orient. Here we have west of Orient of Narrow River. We have about 85 feet here, and then as you go down towards the coast, it kind of pinches out smaller and smaller. So you guys who live near the coast know that you don't have a lot of aquifer depth to install your wells, and it's very precarious sometimes in the summer months, right? How much you're pumping out, you don't want to pull that salt water up. So that's the western part. Here's the eastern part of the aquifer, again going up a little over 50 feet, and again near the coast, you see how it pinches out. So how did we consider whether or not you guys have enough water? We did a water balance, kind of like a water budget. We calculated all the water that's coming in, and then compared that to the water that we calculated that's going out. So coming in on an annual average basis, you have about 4.2 million gallons per day. So that's the bulk of it right there.
Per year.
Per day.
Oh, per day,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, on an average annual basis, that's
Okay.
everything reaching in. But you're right, it sounds like a lot, but yeah, I do mean per day, but thank you.
Okay.
You scared me for a second. And about 157,000 of recharge on an annual average basis through their septic tanks. That's all, you pump it out, you use it, about 85% of it's returned down to the aquifer. Now we looked at what's going out. Up in the main part of the island, it's easy, right? Because the water authority meters all their wells, so you know exactly how much water is being pulled out. Here we had to make some estimates, and we had a lot of help from OA's board on estimating how many people were here, how much water was used, and so forth. And we also had the Browns Hills example to kind of lean back on. So over the course of a year, we're thinking it's about 557,000 gallons per day. Yep, so about 500,000 gallons per day on an average annual basis. However, that ranges from maybe 12,000 gallons per day in like January and February, when there's not a lot of people here, to maybe 1.2, 1.4 million gallons per day in July and August when you have the seasonal population in. So there's a big variation. This is an annual average number. These other numbers that you see here, 8,500 gallons per day, is from what we call non-community supplies. Those are public supplies, but they don't provide water to the same people every day. So that would be like the ferry, the park, restaurants, the school, the church. That's about 8,500 gallons per day. You can't even see it. It's such a small amount. Then agriculture was tough because most of the farms, their wells aren't metered, fine. And the agricultural usage is going to vary from year to year as well, right? It's going to vary depending on how hot it is, how much rain you're getting, what crops are being grown. So we had to kind of put a range on that, using information we had from wells that were metered, that were reporting how much water they had, and then some of the Cornell Cooperative Extension estimates for how much water is required for an acre of corn or an acre of potatoes or something like that. So we put a range on that. Then this turquoise area, this is the amount of water that the model tells us is left. This is the amount of water that's discharging out through the aquifer, traveling out, discharging to the sound, to the Connick, to the harbors and bays. Overall, you guys are good. I mean, overall pumpage, overall net withdrawal on a community-wide basis is 15 to 25% of what's recharging in. So that's not bad. That's good. You're in good shape. The other way that we looked at it is to say, well, what does the water table tell us? Do we see it declining as time goes on? And luckily for us, the USGS has a well right on Main Road that they've been monitoring water levels for since the 1950s. So we have a long-term record that we can look at here. And that's what all these little dots are. You can see very clearly that there's a lot of annual variation, right? The water levels go up higher in the winter. They go down lower in the summer when there's more people and less recharge and more pumping, but they keep coming back up. Here, I don't know how many of us have been around to remember the drought of the early 1960s. So this is kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime historical drought. So these are pretty low levels. You guys were down really low. But through the course of the years, you can see the water table has not been declining. So that's good. That's an indication that whatever you're doing now is okay. We looked at the future, and there's a lot of discussion about, future projected needs. If we use the Suffolk County Department of Economic Development and Planning, if we use their assessment of how many new houses could be built out here, based on current zoning, based on current covenants, and based on preserved lands and so forth, it was a little over 300 new homes, and that would take some farms out of service. Now, I know Barbara has, with boots on the ground here on Orient, has some other insights into that, but if we use that example, and if we say that there's no major change in crops, that the existing farmers don't go and start growing some crops that need a lot more water, you'll have enough water for the future too. So that kind of looks good. Now that's on a community basis. What that doesn't touch upon is saltwater intrusion in the coastal areas. So we have this natural conditions of the water table, the fresh water, constantly discharging out to the surface water. As long as the water levels in the fresh water, the heads in the fresh water stay higher than those in the salt water, then you're good. It's pushing fresh water out. When you start pulling that water table down from pumping, then you're pulling in the salt water. And that is a current problem in coastal areas in Orient right now, and it can also be a problem in inland areas if you start pumping too much during the summer months when you're not getting a lot of recharge. So you have to be very careful. So overall takeaways is, as a community, you guys have enough water to sustain you in the future. Individual homeowners may have some problems, particularly as sea level rises, and we'll touch upon that again in a couple minutes. So that's groundwater quantity. Let's go to groundwater quality. So how do we judge groundwater quality? EPA and New York State have established drinking water standards, drinking water criteria. We call them maximum contaminant levels. And this tells us what's safe to drink, how high can a contaminant concentration be in the water and still protect human health. So I'm going to say EPA has drinking water criteria for maybe about 90 contaminants of concern. New York State has more, maybe about 100. We know that there's tens of thousands of constituents and chemicals that exist, right? Suffolk County Department of Health Services can test for, I think, about 300. Suffolk County Water Authority routinely tests for about 400. I mean, there's so much there. We didn't look at thousands of chemicals. We looked at a handful of those that we consider to be important. So we looked at nitrate, which water managers have been looking at for decades. I want to say the 208 study that Suffolk County did back in 1970s was groundbreaking. And nitrate was one of the major contaminants of concern there, for a batch of reasons. So nitrate is one of the primary contaminants that you see from septic systems, from on-site wastewater treatment systems. It's something that's easily measured. The MCL for that, the drinking water standard for that, is 10 milligrams per liter. So that's pretty high. Over chlorides is more of a taste. It's more of an aesthetic consideration. It also is, the standard for that is 250 milligrams per liter, but that's like associated with sodium, which you don't want in your diet so much. As time went on, we looked at more and more contaminants up throughout the island and here. We looked at the volatile organic contaminants, we looked at pesticides. Those, the MCLs are in the part per billion range, right? Those are called the micrograms per liter. And then you get to the emerging contaminants of concern. As analytical protocols have advanced, now we're looking at these PFAS contaminants, parts per trillion. So we're getting down looking at much smaller traces of these substances in water. So let's talk about nitrogen for a while. Nitrogen, we evaluated in a couple of different ways. Department of Health Services, as you know, tests the private wells. We looked at the data. They don't give us addresses with the data. Everything is all very they protect your privacy, but they give us like a data dump of what's available. And the 137 samples that collected between 2014 and 2021, almost 20% exceeded that 10 milligram per liter MCL. So that's not great. You guys are in groundwater management zone 4, and the Department of Health Services some years ago established a target concentration of 6 milligrams per liter for this zone. Over half of your samples exceeded that 6 milligram per liter target. I want to say the average is about 6.2 milligrams per liter. So this figure here is just a model run that we did as part of the Sub-Watersheds Wastewater Plan, and it shows what the projected levels of nitrogen would be if everything remained constant from here on in. And we compared it to concentrations in wells that we actually knew where they were. These are the non-community wells, so we had data for the non-community wells. You could see out this one is the ferry, one is the park there. The model predicted that we'd be about 2 to 4 milligrams per liter, and that's what they're finding similarly in this area. But you look and you see there's a batch of areas that are not so great, and there's also a batch of patchy areas where concentrations are concerning. So why is nitrogen important? Like nitrogen, the 10 milligram per liter criteria was established to protect against blue baby syndrome. And there's not been any, there hasn't been any instances that we've ever found of blue baby syndrome here in Suffolk County. But there are a lot of other potential health impacts that you can find in the medical journals that haven't translated into standards yet. I know Dr. Chris Gobler is talking about some of the impacts on cardio health. There's some potential concerns with thyroid and such. But it's important for a couple of other reasons. Number one, and this is, we're not talking too much about surface water today, but this is the area where recharging precipitation travels down through the ground and out and discharges to Halleck Bay. And these colors are kind of the travel times. This red zone, it would travel from the water table, carry the nitrogen with it, out to the bay within 2 years, the orange within 10, these little yellow zones within 15, I forgot that, right, 25, sorry. And then the green areas, it takes a little bit longer. Safe levels or healthy levels of nitrogen in surface waters and marine surface waters are more than an order of magnitude lower than that 10 milligram per liter criteria. So you have to protect the groundwater in order to protect the surface water. So that's one reason why nitrogen is important. The other reason is because nitrogen is easy to measure, and it's an indication of the ammonia in urine that goes down through the septic system and out, but it's also essentially a tracer for all the other contaminants of concern that might be also being washed down into your septic system and out through the groundwater. Like I said, it's easy to measure. You don't have to get down with fancy analytical equipment down to the part per trillion level to know that there's some kind of impact, right? Under undeveloped conditions, before we came, nitrogen levels in groundwater are about 1 milligram per liter or lower. So 10 milligrams per liter indicates that we're impacting it, right? That we're having an impact, and it's not a good one. So just quickly, the chloride levels are pretty good throughout most of the island. Here's just an indication of the saltwater intrusion or upconing that we spoke about. These wells are right on the harbor there. They were going over 250 milligrams per liter. You know that if you go out to the ferry and you use the restrooms there, there's a sign, don't drink the water, you know, by order of the Suffolk County Department of Public Health because it's not meeting the criteria. So a quick overview. You guys are really vulnerable to contamination. You really have to be mindful. Anything that you're doing can have a potential impact on your source of supply. So that's really important. Back to different potential sources. Oh, pathogen indicators. So these different contaminants have different potential health impacts, right? Some, like pesticides, can be toxic. Some can be potential cancer-causing agents. Some of these pathogen indicators are like a coliform or enterococcus or other things that you probably see in your well report. Those will make you sick. You know, those are just like germs that make you sick. we can't analyze for all those germs. So we analyze for these pathogen indicators, coliform, Enterococcus, E. coli. Right now, as long as there's sufficient unsaturated zone between the bottom of your septic system and the water table, you're good, because they can't really survive very well outside the human body, outside a nice, moist, wet environment. As sea level rises and you start to close that gap between the bottom of your septic system and the water table, then you have the potential of having a conduit from the septic system to the water. And that might be more of an impact later as we get to the surface water things. I know Barbara had asked me to mention about the depth to groundwater, like for a septic system. I think the county standard is for homes with less than 4 bedrooms. I think it's like 9 feet from ground surface to above the water table, 9 feet. And for homes like 4 or 5 bedrooms, they extend that to 11 feet because you're loading. You're going to be loading more water. So once you start to see that gap close from sea level rise, you need to start to be concerned. I'm not going to talk about PFAS because the county is addressing that. A couple things that you could do is EPA, a lot of them have websites that tell you like safe products that you can use for cleaning and such, so you can check that out. And the one other thing that I can't emphasize enough, I think Joanne and Barbara both said, is have your water tested. The health department will come out, test your water. It's important that you know what you're drinking, and if you need to install treatment or somehow, you should just be aware of what you're ingesting. And I don't want to be too scary because there are some really clean spots of water out here too, but if yours is contaminated, you really want to know that. Okay, quick, we'll go through some climate change considerations. So, this is something that you don't have a lot of control over, right? This is happening right now. We looked at New York State's projections of climate change. This was a requirement that all New York State projects that are going to be publicly funded have to kind of consider what's happening in the future. So we used this high-medium projection that said from a baseline of about the year 2000, sea level would rise by 8 inches in the 2020s. I know where I live, which is about a block from harbor on the North Shore, back in Brookhaven, I definitely see the water table has come up without a doubt. The 2050s, almost 2 feet, 2080s, about 3 feet. By 2100, the water table is going to come up by about 4 feet. So this, I should mention too, we didn't just, even though the New York State one I think is the appropriate one to look at if you guys are going to be looking for grants and such, you'll be good if you use their criteria. We also, this is an area where every day there's new research comes out on climate change and sea level rise. So we looked at the more up-to-date NOAA's 2022 projection, and this high-medium is consistent with their intermediate projection. It seems as the projections, as the science advances, it seems like they're predicting an accelerating.
Quick question.
Sorry.
That's sea level rise, not water table rise, or is
Sea
it
level
both?
rise. Yes, thank you, Barbara. You're right.
Okay.
That's sea level rise. Sea level rise is going to have an impact on the water table, but it's not one and the same. You're right. Thank you.
Okay.
This is just a couple of figures from NOAA's website. You can go to and enjoy yourself if you want. But this is for 2050, assuming there's an almost 2-foot rise in sea level. What will that do to Orient? So these blue areas are areas that are going to be inundated. These green areas are interesting. This is that area along Narrow River that we brought your attention to before. So because of sea level rise, it's going to be kind of coming up from underneath. It's not like it's overwashing from the harbor or from the sound, but it's going to be coming up anyway. So these are areas that in our lifetime we'll probably see will start to be inundated. And then in 2100, the answer gets a little bit more scary. And then Chris, I think you had asked me about the areas, to differentiate between sea level rise and then high tide flooding. This is from the same website. You can just see, this is an area, and you guys will know better than me. This red, they're saying, is currently vulnerable to flooding during high tide. I don't know if it's their model, I don't know how good it is, but you guys can tell me if that's accurate or not. Are you seeing flooding like that during high tide? Am I blocking you, Barbara? This whole
It's okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I can-
Yeah, it's worse than that in some areas.
Oh my gosh, all right. The other impact of climate change on you guys is sea level rise. As the sea level comes up from below, it's also going to impact the thickness of your aquifer. So if you can see, this is that same cross-section that we had from west to east. If you can see, this was the depth of your interface between fresh and salt water.
We can't see your cursor there, just so you know.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. So if you look at the blue line, that was pre-development. That's before any of us got here, and that's a simulation. I mean, I don't have data to tell you that. That's what the model projected. That yellow is about where we are right now. So you can see we haven't had a big impact really on that interface elevation, but as sea level rises by 2100, you can see where that red line is. That shows you how the thickness of your aquifer is going to start to become even tighter. And particularly, see where it goes to the ground surface up there? That's like the narrow river area where you're going to be having that sea level rise is going to just bring that interface all the way up to the surface. So it's just, for planning purposes. So the impacts to you guys from climate change that I think I'd be most concerned about is the increased precipitation. I mean, the northeast part of the country, different parts of the world are going to have different impacts, right? Like some areas are in drought. The northeast part of the United States probably is in a better position. We're going to have more precipitation, so we'll always have a source of fresh water, right? And more intense storm events, which I think we've been seeing too. We're going to have increased temperatures, which we can talk about when we talk about surface water, but then also accelerated sea level rise, which you're seeing. So that, I think I probably went over half an hour. So the preliminary conclusions are that you guys as a community have enough water to satisfy everybody. The coastal areas are vulnerable to saltwater intrusion, so your neighbors and friends along the coast, we're going to have to make some provision to give them fresh water. Your groundwater quality has been impacted, and you just got to do better at protecting that, and then there will be significant impacts from climate change in the coastal areas. So that, in summary, is what we got for groundwater.
And if people have any questions, I'll just repeat them so that everybody can hear them.
Yeah, good.
And my job is to point and repeat, I think. Are there any questions in the back?
Yes. Does emptying or pumping out our cesspools help to the groundwater quality, or it doesn't have an effect at all if we would pump them out more often, say, than we do currently?
Can everybody hear that? If we pump out our cesspools?
So, and I'm going to give you, I'm sorry, kind of a Weasley answer, and it depends answer. So usually when they pump it out, is it from a hydraulic standpoint, from an operations standpoint, you need to make sure that it's operating properly. So I think they usually say like every 3 years or something along those lines.
I've done probably two in rural, yeah, so, yeah.
If you have to do it to, it's not removing the contaminants very much, is what I'm saying. You need to do it in order that it's operating properly and functioning the way that it should hydraulically. But on the other hand, most of the problem, not to be gross, but most of the problem is not from the solids, it's from the urine, it's from the liquid, and that just goes out anyway. You know what I'm saying? So you're not...
We empty both.
Right, you empty both, but it's not like you're removing a lot of the problem from the environment. You're making sure that it operates successfully and it does what it's supposed to do in terms of removing the salts and all that kind of stuff. But it's not like you're going to be removing that much nitrogen from the environment by having it pumped more frequently. Does that answer?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I just was curious, because I just recently had it done. I'm like, oh, I wonder if this is good or bad.
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, but you're not gonna see like a big impact like Delray, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we know what percent of our community took advantage of the grants to put in the safer septic systems?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
That's a question about, do we know what percentage of people in the community took advantage of the advanced septic systems that the county's offered and is still offering?
Right, yes.
And we
Yeah.
don't know, but
It's a good question. I meant to check that actually, but I didn't, so.
We are
I can
looking
check
at
and
that.
we'll put it up on our website.
Yeah, but as part of the study with Suffolk County, the ongoing study for the long-term monitoring program and their adaptive management planning for the subwatersheds wastewater plant, that information is going to come out. So they're compiling that information now, but I don't know now. Yeah.
So the aquifer where you're showing the projection of like 20 or 2100, whatever, when it's like 0 in the Narrow River,
Yeah.
does that make the aquifer not able to go across that area? Like,
Right.
will there be, so it'll just not flow past that anymore?
Well, to the north it will, but it won't, where the salt water comes to the ground surface, no. It's the same thing like crossing the causeway. Like you guys have your own bubble of fresh water. You're not connected to the main island at all. You're not connected to even to the next bubble to the west. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
so that means just to tack onto that, the water at the surface, where the grass is going to be salty. That'll be a marsh. Okay.
Someday.
Someday soon. Misha?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to you
Oh, you're
for all
welcome.
of this work, and thank you to this incredible board and development of OA as an institution. It's just amazing. I'm getting a sense, if I'm understanding this correctly, that the Orient Peninsula, or one island, whatever we want to call it, is in the position to take care of its own water needs without resorting to, can you bring water in from the outside? As in, you're saying it looks like you've got enough, even with the projected 300 extra houses, which is
Yes.
not 3,000 extra houses. And it looks like we need to share some responsibility to make sure that everybody's quality is good. Or maybe we don't share it, but we could potentially share that to make sure both of the coastal properties and whatever other spots that their quality is mitigated appropriately. And that even with climate change, we're still going to be getting enough water in, do you think? How far we're going forward, I'll be dead, but I'm feeling optimistic because the quantity thing has always been a big question. Have we got
Right.
enough? And I feel like, I know there are concerns about nitrates and qualities and things like that, but it sounds like we have, I think first you talked about maybe have some water distance at one point, to mitigate those things on our own without resorting to outside organizations who might want to encroach. Am I summarizing that appropriately?
That is one option. That is one alternative. I believe that you have enough water. I'm not feeling good about the quality of your water since the PFAS, and so we'll see what the health department says in terms of remediating that. I mean, there's different options. Everybody could have their own treatment system, and you'd have to be really faithful if you want to protect your human health and your kids and your grandkids and whatnot. You really have to test the water frequently. You have to make sure you maintain your treatment system. The other option is really to have water from off, I'm saying off island, but off Orient. That is another option. That water is tested every day faithfully, and it's an option, but it's a decision that you guys will make as a community, right?
Joan?
Yeah, the presentation is wonderful, but one of the takeaways I have, I think, I want to know where the water, let's say from the Suffolk Water Authority, do people who use that water, do they have the same contaminants, or is it really clean water to begin with? After they go from Suffolk Water Authority?
It depends. Again, I'm going to give you a Weasley answer because it really depends where they're pulling from on the island. But if they are pulling from an area where, first of all, they try to site their wells where they're going to be pulling clean water because they don't want to have to be treating it. You know, it makes it more expensive, makes it more complicated. But if they do find a contaminant of concern, then they treat for it. They've got GAC on it or air strippers or whatever it happens to be. I mean, so whatever is delivered to the customer, whatever is delivered to the client meets all drinking water requirements. Yeah. Yeah, that's their mission. Yeah.
I have a question about sea level rise.
Yeah.
What's a good source? You know, I mean, as far as if you wanted to watch it yearly, you know, for out here, where would you go to say, okay, somebody's measuring it, and I'm sure it's not an easy measurement.
I would probably go to, I'd look at the NOAA website, I'd look at NOAA, and I'd look at the USGS websites. And I'd poke around there because they're monitoring. There's a, let me just look real quick because I threw, oh shoot, I guess it's not in this one, sorry. There's, I can email one of you guys. There's a monitor off Montauk, which is probably the closest to you, that those measurements are available. So let me just write that down so we don't forget. But if I email it to you, you guys can. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I would do.
Yes, I noticed that the PFAS is a problem where it's more densely populated around the village. How important are these cleaning products, laundry detergents that, you know, goes away to help remedy that? No one's really identified the source of the PFAS.
Yep.
The Suffolk County, as part of the survey, they're also doing a groundwater investigation to try to determine the source.
I'd like to know what laundry product to use.
Yeah.
You referenced the EPA website for that. Maybe we could link that page on the
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if this is just from this. I don't remember if this is from the state website or the EPA website. But those PFAS-containing products are in much more than like laundry detergent. There are so many everyday products, you know. I mean, the water repellent stuff, the food packaging was a big deal. The non-stick. The PFAS that you have here is not from your septic systems. I don't think it is. I've never seen it that high. Like to be such a dispersed source. Like I can't imagine you guys nobody's using that much PFAS, you know? It's more like, right, don't you think like maybe a spill of some sort or I don't know. Sorry, that was just my opinion, but wait for the health department. Andy Rapico is doing that investigation and Andy Rapico at the health department is like top notch. He's what a professional. I mean, he really knows his stuff, and I don't think he'll stop until he figures it out. He's really good. So yeah, we'll stay tuned for Andy's. Yeah.
Any more questions? One here?
Is there any data on people that have their water treated with, say, one of these mermaid solutions compared to those who don't have it treated? Because they come in and test, but I'm not sure of I don't mean to be, nasty, but their qualifications. Are they qualified to really determine what your levels of your drinking water is compared to those who don't have it with a system of,
Okay.
in the past?
So a lot of tests let me say Suffolk County Department of Health Services, the sanitarians that they send out are all trained. They all have their sampling protocols. Like they are professionals. They know what they're doing. When they bring it to the lab, this Suffolk County Public and Environmental Health Laboratory is an ELAB, that certified lab. That means the state DOH certifies them. So they have to pass all kinds of tests topics in order to be able to say that they're an ELAC certified lab and to be qualified.
I'm not really talking about them.
Okay.
because Obviously, they have credentials. But I'm talking about just the few water treatment places that come in and change your filters and your water, you know, the house, initially just their house full of water, compared to those who don't go to have that, you know,
I think she's asking about filtered versus unfiltered.
Of course.
So they tested my house for PFAS, and they tested both the water right as it comes into the house and the water after the filter system. And the water as it comes into the house, in my case, unfortunately, was very high for PFAS. And the water after the filter system had 0 parts per trillion of PFAS. I don't know, does that help?
yeah, it does.
That's a reverse osmosis system that he has. People have different types of systems, and so it's hard to say whether what they're filtering out and how efficiently they're doing it. But, I don't think anyone's done like health studies of Orient to see, you know, the people who are using filtered water are healthier than the people who aren't. So.
Not a health study, but the county does have data like in their results. You'll see they say raw or after, and they list the different treatment. They don't list the vendor, but they'll say after GAC or whatever. So we could kind of extract it, is the system working or not? But
Right.
that's as far as we get probably.
Yeah, and if you have the testing done, you'll see the results will have both. They'll test before your treatment and after your treatment, so that you can see if the treatment's doing anything.
Thank you.
So are there any projected treatment, any projected solutions to this contamination of our drinking water?
You're talking about
The PFAS?
Other than delivering water, bottled water, or having put in the whole system with carbon, is there a long-term solution to this? An easier solution?
Well, you can filter it out from from what I understand, a reverse osmosis system will take out the PFAS. No?
Well,
To some,
that's not the preferred system. That's not what they're installing. They're installing granular
Carbon filters,
activated carbon filters. I think what you're asking, like, we could become a Superfund site, and they can actually pump the water out, filter it, and pump it back in. If they determine the source,
yeah, you're right.
and, you know, so that's, I think, what you're asking.
That would be a question for the health department, right?